It was a quiet Saturday morning. The sun filtered gently through the trees outside, and birds chirped peacefully around the vast grounds of the Dyke mansion. Zara and Nathan were just about to step out, she dressed casually in a floral wrap gown, he in a light brown caftan, keys in hand, when they both halted at the sound of a soft sobbing coming from outside the main gate. Nathan furrowed his brow. "Do you hear that?" Zara nodded, already moving toward the front door. As they reached the top of the stairs that overlooked the entrance, the sight below made her pause. Mila. She was seated on the ground by the gate, her legs pulled up to her chest, tears streaking down her face. She looked nothing like the confident, pampered girl who once lived to mock Zara. Her hair was messy, clothes slightly rumpled, her shoulders shaking with each quiet cry. Zara blinked, stunned. "Is that Mila?" Before Nathan could respond, the guard had already opened the gates for them. As they approached, Mila suddenly looked up, and the moment she saw Zara, her sobs grew louder. "Zara," she whimpered, standing to her feet with wobbly legs. "I didn't know where else to go. Mummy has been so harsh. She said things that..." She paused to catch her breath, then muttered, "I even thought of ending it all. I just want to rest my head somewhere peaceful. I needed air, a new space, a place to think." "I'm tired, Zara. I'm tired." Zara's lips parted in disbelief. She exchanged a slow glance with Nathan, who stood beside her, his expression unreadable. He said nothing. Mila sniffled dramatically, wiping her tears. But then, her eyes met Zara's, and something shifted in her tone. "Is this how you live now?" she asked, glancing around at the luxurious driveway, the garden and the mansion behind them. Her gaze lingered, sharp despite the tears. "You're really enjoying this life, aren't you?" Zara's brows furrowed at her words. "Mila, you didn't tell anyone you were coming. You just showed up at our gate like this?" "So what?" Mila snapped, her tone suddenly shifting. "You're my sister, aren't you? Or have you forgotten that too now that you're living like a queen?" Zara took a step back, watching her carefully. The desperation in Mila's eyes was real, but beneath it there was something else, something darker, something that didn't quite match her tears. Nathan folded his arms, still silent, still observing. "I just needed to breathe," Mila added, her voice softening again. "That house feels like a prison, and I thought, maybe here, with you, I could catch my breath." Zara looked at her long and hard. She wanted to believe Mila was broken, in pain and needed help, but a quiet voice inside her whispered, "Be careful." Something wasn't right. Not with the way Mila's gaze kept flickering around the house, not with the way her fingers clutched her phone tightly behind her back, not with how quickly her tone shifted, from helpless to bitter. After Mila's sudden arrival, Zara tried her best to remain gracious. She led her to one of the beautifully furnished guest rooms on the east wing of the mansion, a space she rarely allowed anyone to use. "This is your room," Zara had said, trying to mask her unease. "You'll be staying here for now." Mila gave a small smile, but behind her eyes was something unreadable. She ran her fingers along the polished wardrobe, her lips curving slightly. "Thank you, sis," she said sweetly. "We'll have such a good time together, just like old times." But it wasn't old times, and deep down, Zara knew that Mila hadn't come for sisterhood. What Mila didn't say out loud echoed louder than what she did. In the days that followed, Mila made herself at home, not just physically, but emotionally. She attached herself to Zara's routines, often sitting with her during meal prep, walking into her room unannounced, or popping into her conversations with Nathan. At first, Zara thought her sister was just trying to be close, but there was a pattern, a quiet, unnerving one. She would say things that sounded innocent on the surface but held a bitter aftertaste. "Nathan's always so quiet. Don't you ever wonder what he's thinking?" You know, these quiet men, they're good at hiding things. You trust people too easily, Zara. Not everyone shows you who they really are. Zara would laugh it off, but a seed had been planted. And Mila, with her smile and perfectly timed silences, was watering it. Then it happened. One warm afternoon, Nathan's personal assistant stopped by. She was a graceful, sharp-looking young woman in a fitted black skirt and crisp white blouse. She came to pick up a forgotten file. Zara welcomed her in, as always, offered a drink, and walked her to Nathan's study. Nothing unusual. Until later that evening. Mila strolled into Zara's room, settling at the edge of the bed, watching her closely. "That woman from earlier, the one who came for the file," Mila started. Zara looked up from her book. "Yes?" "She's pretty. I mean, I'd be uncomfortable if my husband had a personal assistant that polished." Mila tilted her head, watching Zara's reaction like a hawk. "And the way she smiled at Nathan. That wasn't just business." Zara chuckled nervously. "Mila, don't start. I'm just saying, you saw it, right? Or are you pretending not to?" Zara's laugh faded. She shook her head, but the words clung to her thoughts like shadows. That night, as Nathan changed into his nightwear, Zara studied him carefully. His face was calm. He asked how her day was, talked about an upcoming meeting, but her focus drifted. When he got into bed and reached for his phone to set an alarm, her eyes followed his every move. She tried not to care, tried not to wonder, tried not to let Mila's words replay. But they did. The next few days grew heavier. Zara's joy dulled. She smiled less. She asked Nathan more questions, about the office, about his assistant, about his phone habits. Nathan noticed, confused but patient. But tension had settled. Soft at first, then firmer, louder. They argued one night over something trivial, a miscommunication. But Mila watched from the hallway, hiding just out of sight, a small smile tugging at her lips. Her plan was working. The once peaceful home, filled with shared meals and laughter, now carried a faint heaviness. Suspicion sat at the table where trust once lived. Silence lingered in the places where love used to speak freely. Mila moved through the mansion like a quiet storm, still smiling, still soft-spoken, but leaving little pieces of chaos behind wherever she went. And Zara, heart conflicted, stood in the middle of it all, trying to protect her marriage, yet slowly losing herself to the whispers of doubt. At first, it was the little things. Nathan would come home a bit later than usual. He would be more exhausted, less talkative. Zara brushed it off: meetings, traffic, stress, anything to avoid facing the one thing she was scared to admit. Something was shifting between them. Dinner grew colder each night, both the food and the silence at the table. Nathan would barely eat more than a few bites before mumbling something about fatigue and heading to the living room to sleep. The bedroom that once held soft whispers and gentle laughter began to echo with silence. Zara, heavy-hearted, paced the room one night, her eyes flicking between the untouched dinner tray and the door Nathan hadn't opened in over an hour. Mila appeared at her door, wearing a silk robe, a bowl of popcorn in hand, as if nothing serious was unfolding around them. "He's still in the parlor?" she asked with a tilt of her head. Zara nodded, fighting back the sting in her eyes. Mila sighed and sat beside her on the bed. "Zara, I know I shouldn't say this, but maybe you should stop trying so hard. If a man loves you, you won't need to beg for his attention." Zara looked down. "He used to be so different. Nathan never ignored me. He never left the room without saying goodnight." "People change," Mila said casually, tossing a popcorn kernel into her mouth. "Especially men with options." Zara flinched. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing." Mila raised her hands. "I'm just saying, don't lose yourself trying to hold on to someone who's already slipping away. I want your happiness. I don't want to see you lose your glow over a man who barely looks you in the eye anymore." Zara turned her head to the window, tears quietly sliding down her cheek. The next morning, Nathan left early. Again, no goodbye, no kiss, just the soft sound of the door closing and his cologne lingering in the hallway. Zara stood in the kitchen, staring at the breakfast she'd prepared with shaky hands. The eggs were still steaming, the toast crisp, but the table was empty. Again. Mila strolled in behind her, tying her headscarf like someone preparing for yoga. "He didn't eat?" she asked knowingly. Zara shook her head. "This isn't love anymore," Mila said, leaning on the counter. "This is emotional punishment. You deserve more, Zara." Zara didn't respond, but she knew. Deep down, the warmth in their marriage had dimmed. And Mila? She was there to feed the fire, not with love, but with quiet fuel. Some nights, Nathan didn't come home until nearly midnight. Zara would sit in the living room pretending to read a book, but really just listening, waiting for the gate to open, for footsteps to approach. They rarely did. And when he did come in, his voice was short, his eyes tired. He barely touched her anymore. Zara tried. She wore his favorite dress one night, cooked his favorite soup. He simply smiled and said, "I'm not hungry tonight." Then he picked up a pillow and walked straight to the couch. Zara stood at the doorway, watching him curl up without even a glance back. She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Mila sat beside Zara at the vanity as she brushed her hair. "I know you don't want to hear this," she began, her tone soft and strategic. "But if I were in your shoes, I'd be asking myself some serious questions." Zara kept brushing, slower now. "Do you think there's someone else?" Zara asked, her voice nearly breaking. Mila exhaled heavily, her silence louder than words. Then, carefully, "I don't want to believe it, but men like Nathan. Handsome, powerful, distant. They don't just stay away for no reason." She placed a gentle hand on Zara's shoulder. "Whatever happens, don't let a man kill your joy. You're worth more than this." Zara closed her eyes. She didn't know what hurt more, Nathan's silence or Mila's voice that made it feel like the truth. Mila had everything planned. That night, the mansion felt unusually quiet. Zara had stayed back at the school to finish up a project. Nathan had come home earlier than usual, his shirt clinging to his skin, his steps dragging with exhaustion. He barely looked up as he walked through the front door, his mind weighed down by deadlines, pressure, and the silence between him and his wife that had now become routine. "Good evening, Nathan," Mila said softly, appearing by the hallway, her voice sweet and unnervingly warm. He nodded. "Evening." His voice was dry. He moved past her, loosening his collar. She noticed it, the weakness, the weariness. This was the opening she'd been waiting for. "Nathan, you look exhausted," Mila said, appearing beside him in the living room with a gentle smile. "Let me get you something cool to drink, you'll feel better." He nodded absent-mindedly. "Sure, just water is fine." But Mila had no intention of bringing just water. From the corner of her drawer, she pulled out a sachet of crushed sleeping pills, just enough to blur his thoughts, fog his reactions, slow down his senses. She stirred it carefully into the glass and returned with a calm smile. "Here," she said, handing him the drink. Nathan downed it in 2 long gulps, groaned softly, and sank deeper into the couch, already feeling his body betray him. Moments later, Mila helped him to his feet. "You need rest. Come, just lie down for a bit," she whispered, leading him toward the guest room. He could barely resist. As he collapsed onto the bed, disoriented and mumbling, she gently unbuttoned his shirt. But she didn't touch him further. Instead, she screamed, a loud, piercing cry that echoed through the halls of the mansion. Then she flung herself to the floor, tearing her clothes, smudging her face with tears. She forced herself to cry. She waited. Zara was almost home. Zara returned home around 9 p.m., tired but excited. She had stopped to get Nathan's favorite meal, thinking maybe tonight would be different. Maybe they could talk, laugh, reconnect. She stepped into the house, silence greeting her. "Nathan," she called gently, setting down her bag. "I got dinner." No response. Then she heard it, sobbing. Hysterical, painful sobbing. She dropped everything and ran towards the sound. When she burst into the hallway near the guest room, she froze at the sight before her. Mila, on the floor, disheveled, crying uncontrollably. Nathan, shirtless, passed out on the bed. "Oh my God, what happened?" Zara screamed, rushing to her sister's side. Mila's body shook violently. Her voice came out broken, barely coherent. He touched me, Zara. I told him no. I begged him, but he wouldn't stop." Zara's eyes widened, her mind spinning. "What are you saying?" Nathan groaned beside her, disoriented. He blinked slowly, still under the effects of the drug. What's going on?" Zara's voice cracked. "Nathan, look at me! Look at me!" He sat up groggily, rubbing his head, still half asleep. But then he looked down. He saw the sheets. He saw Mila. He saw Zara's face. And suddenly, clarity hit him like a truck. "No! No! What is this?" he gasped, horror flooding his features. Zara stood still, trembling violently. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Tell me this didn't happen. Please, tell me it didn't." "He forced himself on me," Mila sobbed. He took my virginity, Zara. Nathan raped me." Zara stumbled backward, heart pounding, chest rising and falling in disbelief. Her eyes darted to Nathan, who lay unconscious, completely unaware of the storm erupting around him. "No, Nathan would never," she muttered, shaking her head. He wouldn't." Mila screamed louder, cradling herself. "You don't believe me? I'm your sister. I came here for safety, and this is what I get?" Zara fell to her knees, tears pouring down her face. Why is this happening? And in that moment, Zara's world shattered. She didn't know what to believe. Her husband, her sister. Everything she thought was solid now felt like it was sinking beneath her. But unknown to Mila, something far bigger was watching. And the truth will soon come out. To be continued. Don't miss the final part. Like, comment, and subscribe for the next twist in Zara's emotional journey.